Daniel learned early that life rewarded patience more than desire. He grew up in a quiet Michigan town where mornings smelled like coffee and wet pavement, where people waved even when they had nothing to say. He carried that calm into adulthood. He worked in an office near the lake, paid his bills on time, and kept his hopes neat and controlled. He believed that wanting too much only led to disappointment. So he trained himself to want less. That belief held until Claire arrived. She came into his life without noise or drama. One autumn afternoon, she walked into the local community center for a volunteer meeting Daniel almost skipped. She introduced herself with a soft confidence, her voice clear, her eyes honest. She had moved from Toronto for work and spoke about the change like someone trying to sound braver than she felt. Daniel noticed the small pause in her smile, the way she listened more than she spoke. From that day on, she became part of his routine. They shared small tasks, casual jokes, and long conversations that started with safe topics and ended in quiet reflection. Claire had a way of asking questions that made people answer truthfully without realizing it. Daniel found himself telling her things he rarely said out loud about his childhood. His doubts, his habit of standing back instead of stepping forward. Their friendship grew fast but carefully. There were no dramatic moments, no sudden confessions. Just steady time, coffee after work, walks near the lake when the weather allowed. Long messages late at night that ended with, "Get some rest." Daniel told himself it was enough, but feelings do not listen to rules. He began to notice the way his chest tightened when Claire laughed with someone else. The way her absence made ordinary days feel hollow. He noticed how his thoughts moved toward her without effort, how his future plans slowly reshaped themselves to include her presence. He tried to ignore it, reminding himself that comfort was not the same as love. That closeness did not mean intention. Claire, meanwhile, carried her own quiet struggles. She loved the independence her move had given her, but loneliness followed her like a shadow. She missed familiar streets, old friends, and the certainty of being known. With Daniel, she felt understood without explanation. That comfort scared her. She had learned from past heartbreaks that safety could disappear without warning, so she stayed in the middle ground. Close, but not committed. Open, but not vulnerable enough to be hurt. Months passed like this. Seasons changed. Winter softened. Into spring, their bond deepened, yet remained unnamed. People around them noticed. Friends hinted. Strangers assumed. But Daniel and Claire never crossed the invisible line until the day everything shifted. They were sitting on a bench near the lake, the water calm, the sky heavy with gray clouds. It was one of those afternoons that made people thoughtful. Claire stared at the horizon longer than usual. Daniel sensed something was wrong, but waited. He had learned that silence sometimes invited truth. "I'm tired of uncertainty," Claire said finally. Her voice was steady, but her hands were folded tightly in her lap. "I don't want to keep standing in places where I don't know what I mean to someone." Daniel felt the words land hard. He wanted to respond, to say what had been building inside him for months. But fear spoke faster than honesty. He nodded, said something careful, something that did not risk change. Claire smiled politely, but something in her eyes dimmed. That night, Daniel stood alone in his kitchen, replaying the moment again and again. He realized he had reached a quiet breaking point. Not dramatic, not loud, just clear. He understood that staying silent was no longer safe. That choosing comfort over truth would cost him something he could not replace. For the first time, he admitted the truth to himself. He wanted Claire. Not as an idea, not as a possibility, but as a real part of his life. He wanted to stop wondering and start choosing. The thought scared him, but it also brought relief. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then typed a message that felt heavier than it looked. When he pressed send, there was no excitement, only calm. Resolve, the moment had arrived, and he had finally listened. The next day moved with strange intensity. Daniel noticed everything. The sound of traffic, the way time slowed and rushed at once. He felt exposed, like someone who had stepped into open space after years of hiding behind walls. They met at a cafe downtown, a place neither of them had visited before. It felt neutral, safe. Claire arrived early. Daniel could see tension in her posture, curiosity mixed with caution. They exchanged small talk, but neither pretended this was an ordinary meeting. Daniel spoke first. He did not prepare a speech, he did not try to impress. He simply told the truth as clearly as he could. He said he was tired of pretending, tired of standing still while his feelings moved forward. He said he did not want to lose her by staying quiet. He said he was asking, not demanding. Offering, not pushing. Claire listened closely. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she took a long breath. She admitted she had felt the same pull, but had been afraid to name it alone. She spoke about her past, about trusting too slowly and fucking. And we alone to trusting too slowly and leaving too quickly. She said she needed honesty more than promises. Daniel understood. He did not rush her. He did not try to convince her. He told her he respected her pace but could not return to silence. That honesty changed the air between them. The uncertainty did not disappear, but it shifted. It became shared instead of lonely. They left the cafe without clear answers, but with something better: mutual truth. As they walked in opposite directions, Daniel felt both lighter and more exposed than ever before. He knew the future was uncertain. He knew choosing to speak did not guarantee success. But for the first time, he felt aligned with himself. The moment had made him ask for something he had always denied himself. And no matter what came next, he knew one thing for sure. He had finally stopped waiting for life to choose for him. The next morning did not feel new. It felt exposed. Daniel woke before his alarm, staring at the ceiling as light crept through the curtains. The words from the cafe still echoed in his mind, not as sound but as weight. He had spoken the truth, and now he had to live inside it. There was no going back to ease. Whatever came next would ask something from him. He went through his routine with care, as if moving too fast might disturb the fragile balance he felt inside. Coffee tasted sharper. The air outside felt colder. Every detail seemed louder than usual. He checked his phone often, not expecting a message, but unable to stop hoping. Claire had not written. That silence was not rejection, but it was not comfort either. At work, Daniel struggled to focus. He answered emails, attended meetings, nodded at familiar faces, but his thoughts stayed elsewhere. He wondered if Claire was feeling the same pull, between relief and fear. He wondered if honesty had brought them closer or pushed them toward an ending. Neither of them wanted to admit. By afternoon, his patience thinned. He realized waiting would not bring clarity. So he did what he had learned. To do only recently, he reached out again, not to demand answers, but to stay present. He sent a short message asking if she wanted to walk by the lake later. No pressure, just space. Claire replied an hour later. Yes, that would be good. They met as the sun lowered, the sky soft with fading light. The lake reflected the quiet mood of the evening. Neither of them rushed into conversation. They walked side by side, letting the rhythm of their steps guide them forward. Claire spoke first. She said she had not slept much. She said honesty felt freeing but also dangerous. She admitted she had built her independence carefully and feared losing it. Daniel listened without interrupting. He told her he did not want to take anything from her life, only to stand within it honestly. They talked as they walked, not circling the past, but moving through it. Claire explained that her previous relationship had ended slowly, painfully, with promises that faded into silence. She said she had learned to protect herself by leaving questions unanswered. Daniel told her he had spent years avoiding risk, mistaking safety for peace. The truth between them began to feel less sharp and more steady. They reached the edge of the pier and stopped. The water was calm. The city lights flickered on in the distance. Claire looked at Daniel and said she needed time, not distance. She needed to move forward carefully, not retreat. Daniel accepted that without hesitation. He knew trust did not grow on pressure. Over the next few weeks, their connection changed. While it changed shape, they did not rush into labels or expectations. Instead, they chose consistency. They made time for each other. They checked in honestly. They noticed when fear appeared and named it instead of letting it control them. There were difficult days. Moments when Claire pulled back, unsure if she was ready to open fully. Moments when Daniel felt the old urge to step aside to avoid disappointment. But they talked through those moments, choosing clarity over comfort again and again. One evening, Claire invited Daniel to her apartment for dinner. It was simple and unplanned. They cooked together, laughing when things went wrong, sharing stories from childhood that carried both warmth and loss. The ease between them surprised them both. It felt earned, not accidental later. Sitting across from each other, Claire said something that stayed with Daniel. She said love for her was not about intensity, but intention. About showing up even when fear suggested leaving. Daniel understood then that what they were building was not fragile. It was careful, and that made it strong. As summer arrived, their lives began to overlap naturally. Friends noticed the change. There was no announcement, no dramatic shift, just presence. They became part of each other's routines in quiet, meaningful ways. Morning messages, shared plans, long conversations that did not rush toward conclusions. Still, uncertainty did not disappear completely. One afternoon, Claire received an offer from her company on opportunity to return to Toronto in a higher role. It was everything she had worked toward. When she told Daniel, her voice shook. They sat together, facing a choice neither of them had expected so soon. Claire feared that choosing her career might mean losing what they had built. Daniel feared that asking her to stay would repeat old mistakes he promised himself not to make. They talked for hours. They spoke about distance, about trust, about whether connection could survive change. Daniel told her he would not ask her to give up her future for him. Claire told him she did not want success that required losing something real. In the end, Claire asked for a few days to decide. Those days tested them more than any silence before. But they stayed open. They stayed honest. When Claire finally spoke, her choice surprised even her. She accepted the role but negotiated a delayed start. She wanted time to see if what they had could grow strong enough to carry them forward. No matter where they ended up, Daniel admired her courage. He did not promise ease, but he promised effort. He promised not to disappear into fear again. The months that followed were full of planning, adjusting, learning. They learned how to miss each other without pulling away, how to support without controlling, how to trust without certainty. On Claire's last night before leaving, they walked by the lake again. The place where everything had shifted now felt familiar, steady. Claire told Daniel she did not know what the future would look like, but she knew she wanted him in it. Daniel answered without hesitation that he felt the same. They did not make grand promises. They made realistic ones to communicate, to choose honesty, to keep asking instead of assuming. As Claire left the next morning, Daniel stood watching until she disappeared from sight. The ache was real, but so was the hope. He understood now that asking for something did not guarantee keeping it forever. It guaranteed only one thing: that whatever happened would be real. The moment that had made him request that truth had changed his life. Not because it gave him certainty, but because it gave him courage. And that, Daniel realized, was something no distance could take away.